Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hi, I'm Kilroy. Welcome to another episode of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. Behind the Music is the main thing because after 4 decades in Nashville, boy, do I have some stories to tell and fun to have. Glad you're with us today, and I'm also glad that my wife Elizabeth is here today. My dear, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Pretty darn good. Better since you're here.
What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, heck, let's talk about the origins of the incredible Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee, which has produced so much entertainment and enjoyment.
Exciting.
Oh, it is exciting. It was exciting when I went there. Are you kidding? I came to town off a ranch in Liberty, Texas, and come to Nashville, Tennessee, where the Grand Ole Opry originated and all the country music was there. And I thought, oh, my God, this is something. So, of course, I've got to go to Music Row. Music Row, people that just think, well, Music Row, that's where the music people were, but they never know exactly where it started or how it started. There was a guy by the name of Paul Cohen who was an innovator in country music, and he was doing a lot of things, and Decca Records hired him to open an office there and sign some country acts. And he did. And there was a guy by the name of Owen Bradley, a legend, trust me, a legend in Nashville, that took those row of houses on 16th Avenue and made it Music Row. And did he do a job? You know, the first studio Owen built on Music Row, which is the only one there, was called the Quonset Hut. It was called the Quonset Hut because he had bought a Quonset hut, which was surplus from the government they used during World War II. Mm-hmm. He converted it to a studio, attached it to an old house he had there, and started recording there, and did a lot of things. Owen was a true gentleman. You know, now, if you go there, on the foot or the start of Music Row, there is a bronze statue of Owen playing the piano.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and a great guy, too. He was a fabulous musician, started playing real young. And then WSM, the big radio station there, 50,000 watt, went everywhere. They had a morning show. This was back in the 30s and 40s when they did this. They had like huge orchestras that would play for 1 hour, 2 hours every morning. People would start their morning. Owen became leader of that orchestra.
A live orchestra?
In a radio station. That was back in the 30s and 40s, and people would tune in and listen to the music.
Well, that was before my time.
Yeah, way before mine, too, trust me. But matter of fact, it was so far back that I don't even remember being around the radio listening to it. But I know it was real big. Mm. You know, talking to my folks, they listened to it, of course. But it was country music coming into my hometown, which I really fell in love with immediately, and I wanted to be part of it. But I had an obstacle.
What was that?
Obsession with rodeo. I mean, that's
not a bad deal.
All I ever wanted to be was a cowboy. And then I said, well, you know, music's a good thing, too. I've shared this story before.
Well, you came from a music family.
Yeah, everybody played. My mother taught piano and voice. Her brothers played piano. My sister played piano. She sang on the radio in Houston. She was much older than I. I was the baby of the family. But
Did she sing with Gene Autry?
Yep, she worked with Gene Autry for years, and that was before I came along. So I didn't meet Gene Autry till the 70s.
Oh, that's another story.
I know, it's another. That was an expensive story.
Yeah.
Not having dinner with Mr. Autry, but the outcome of that, but a foolish trap I fell into. But Mr. Autry was a hero of mine, mm-hmm. and I got my first horse when I was 3 years old. And I named him, guess what I named him?
Champ.
And that's what Gene Autry wrote, and it was good enough for him, it's good enough for my horse. So me and old Champ, we had chased outlaws, and we rounded up cattle, and we did all kind of stuff in our mind. Champ was a good one. But we're here to talk about Music Row. The old houses I spoke of were eventually, time by time, week by week, it seemed like, but probably month by month, a publishing company would rent an old house and restore it to where it was usable. Mm-hmm. And then maybe a writer would rent a house or buy a home there. But the whole row was nothing but houses full of creative people, either writers, publishers, producers, record executives. Everything was right there. And it was such a friendly atmosphere. I was blessed to be part of that. and I was blessed to be introduced and endorsed by the great Farron Young. Farron was a superstar and had a lot of power in Nashville. No, power is not a good word. He had a lot of influence in what happened in Nashville at that time. You hear me speak of Farron a lot.
Yes, I have.
You hear me speak of a lot of people a lot.
Yes, I have.
21 years of stories, and my mind is packed with them. And every now and then I've got to drop a new one on you that comes back to my mind.
I don't know if you've dropped any new ones on me lately, but back to Music Row.
Back to Music Row. Yeah, it was an experience there. The family ties were there amongst the music people. Everyone came from a rural background, and they brought that attitude with them where they were friendly, they wanted to be part of everything, so you could go down the row and people stick their head out and just say, hey, how you doing today? And what you doing? How's your wife? How's your kid? How's your dog? It was all like a family, and people loved each other, and it showed in the music. We used to think that people were crazy for paying us to do something that we love so much. I never did wake up in the morning and dread going to the studio because I knew I was going to hear some great music. And I was so blessed to be exposed to such great country singers like your friend, Ray Price.
My friend, huh?
Yeah, he's the one that gave you a horse. I didn't
Yes,
give you
he
that
did.
horse.
Yes, he did.
I never will forget the day I got that call from Ray. Ray, of course, was so proud to have him as a close friend. And I got a call, and he said, Kilroy. I said, yes, sir. He said, I've got a horse I want to give Elizabeth. I said, oh, my God. Those are scary words. I've got a horse I want to give you or give your wife. And he started telling me everything this horse did. He said, he's the best horse I've ever had in my life. Ray had a lot of race horses. He was definitely into running horses. And he said, this horse has won more money than any horse I've ever owned. He won almost $500,000. And I said, well, why do you want to give him away? He said, well, I don't know what's wrong with him. I've spent $11,000 having him to veterinarians, but he'll start a race, and then all of a sudden he'll just spin around and throw the jockey off. And I thought maybe that...
So he's going to give this horse to me.
He's going to give you a crazy horse.
So he can throw me off, huh?
Right. Well, he never did that. But
no,
he had a
never
problem.
did. He tried.
So remember, Ray spent $11,000 trying to fix the problem. He said, I think maybe Liz could take this horse and make a barrel racing horse out of him. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay. And in the meantime, I called Willie. And I said, Willie, because he'd played drums for Ray for a long time. I said, will Ray lie to you? He said, well, he told the truth one time, then he lied out of it. He was kidding, of course. So
he exaggerated.
I know.
I think it's nicer to say he exaggerated.
I called a personal friend of ours who's gone on now, a horse trainer from up in West Virginia. And he came down and he looked at the horse and what have you. In the meantime, I should have said, we went, oh, I got to back up. This is too good. I don't want to leave anything out. Anyway, you and I went to Ray's ranch, which is only about 120 miles from our ranch, to look at this horse he's going to give you. And here comes Ray in his old slouchy blue jean jacket and really casual, kind of slow walking. And he said, come on down here, show you this horse that I have for Elizabeth. I said, okay. So you and I are walking down there, and he has all these paddocks, small pens. And there's these broken down mares in there that looked old, and they had some foals and they were tired. And I'm thinking, oh God, what kind of horse are we going to get? And what did you think when we got to the end? You saw that horse.
He was fabulous. He was.
He was, as far as looks goes, the closest looking horse to Secretariat I'd ever seen. I mean, it was like
just a pumped up Secretariat, but
wow, this one. So, of course, we loaded him up, took it home, and you started working on him, and he started getting a little bit wacky on you halfway through a discipline, You started like, well, how would he act? Just kind of like hot, kind of like, I gotta go,
he
gotta
just
go.
got hot and wanted to try to throw you off.
I know. So this trainer, I got ahead of myself. The trainer that we were talking about came down to visit us, And by this time that you'd kind of given up on him because he was just, all of a sudden, he'd just go ballistic. So he's looking at him, this trainer, looking at the horse in the pasture. And I said, do you think that horse can ever run again? He said, I don't know. I was thinking the same thing. Why don't you put him on the van and have him shipped up to West Virginia, and we'll try him. I talked it over with you, and you said, yeah, let's give it a try. We met that van somewhere over on Interstate 45 or something, and it was a racehorse van. Loaded horse up and sent him there, and he got to working on him and what have you. The funny part of the story, Ray came by, and he was kind of hanging out. I said, come on to the house. I want to show you something. And I put, the horse's name was No Matter Who. That was his registered name. And we called him Ray. That was apropos. Nevertheless, he sent a video of a race. Mm-hmm. I said, Chief, come on in here. We called him Chief from the Cherokee Cowboys. And I put this CD in, or DVD in, and he was sitting in the chair. He said, this looks like a racehorse. It's a racetrack. I said, yeah, it's a horse race. But it was so foggy that night. It was terribly foggy. The announcer could not even see the starting gate. He said, it's awfully foggy out here. I don't think they're off. Nope, they're off. No, they're not off yet. I mean, you couldn't see anything. And he said, okay, now they're off. And he's given the play where the horse was. Never mentioned No Matter Who. And they came to the head of the stretch, and he said, and No Matter Who is coming off the rail. And Ray jumped up and said, nobody. How is that horse running? I said, we fixed him, Ray. He said, well, what happened? I said, well, he was cutting up on the track up there with the trainer. Trainer called and said, hey, I want to take him to the track vet. And I said, well, sure, go ahead. And he called me back and said, they can fix this. There's a muscle in his neck, and it's collapsing on him, cutting his wind off, and he's having panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And I said, my God, what does a surgery cost to fix something like that? He said, it's going to cost $125.
Or a bottle of Xanax, maybe.
Yeah, I said, can you just go ahead and do it, for God's sake? So that all got straightened out.
Yeah,
so I told Ray, I said, that cost $125. He said, I spent $11,000 trying to fix it. But we kept him, and finally called up there, and he did good running up there, and won some money, enough to cover what we'd spent in shipping and training and so forth. But it was kind of a fun trip. But it was time for Ray to come back home, and so we brought him back home. Yep. And then, what did we do? Just say, Ray, we really don't have, we had a lot of horses then, and we needed to maybe take Ray home. So we took Ray home.
We took Ray back.
Yeah, but Ray Price was a guy that I dearly loved, and I treasured every minute that I spent with him. Every minute he was at our home, and every minute we were over at his place. He was a joy to go around because he had so many stories, and I love stories. I love to tell them. I love to listen to them. But he fronted Hank Williams' band. Hank Williams died when I was a child, like when I was 10 or 12 years old. And I was really a fan of his music, but to know someone that knew him so intimately, because Ray fronted his band when Hank and his wife Audrey were on the outs. Then Hank Williams lived with Ray Price for a while. So he had all these Hank Williams stories, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, tell me another one. I'm just eating it up, Somebody that knew him so well.
All right, now.
Now what?
Let's go back to Music Row.
Oh, Music Row. I'm over on 19th Street. We need to be on 16th. Music Row.
Well, let's go back to Music Row. I have a question now that we've horse raced a little bit. What's the difference in the Opry House and the Grand Ole Opry?
Well, the Ryman Auditorium is where the Grand Ole Opry originated. And that, of course, at one time was a cathedral built by a steamboat captain. Mm-hmm. And I guess Life and Casualty Insurance, I hope I'm right on that, they own WSM. And they went and bought that from the steamboat captain and turned it into a venue which became home of the Grand Ole Opry. Then, years later, they built Opryland. Mm-hmm. Ed Gaylord out of Oklahoma City, he built Opryland and built a whole new a whole new venue for the Grand Ole Opry and moved it out there. But 16th Avenue, talking about Music Row, the magic was there in the early days, and then it started changing through the years. And it was all changing for the good, because look what the 70s brought us. I mean, it brought us Mickey Gilley. It brought us Jerry Lee Lewis Country. Who else came along there? Oh, Mo Bandy, which we're going to have Mo on this program.
Yes, we are.
And Gene Watson was from the 70s. Yep, he's going to be here.
A bunch of people.
I know. I'm looking forward to a visit with our dear friend Janie Fricky. Mm-hmm. You and Fricky are pals, and she worked a lot of my sessions as a harmony singer.
Yep.
Because that's what she did to live when she came to Nashville, because of her pure voice and her innate ability to timbre her voice in different ways and also never sing out of tune. So she was on the Gilley records, everything I produced, Louise Mandrell. I really can't remember a record after Janie got to town that I didn't use her as a harmony singer.
So what happened to Music Row as you knew it?
Well, I'll tell you what happened, and I don't want to offend anyone because it's circumstances. Country music began to grow in the 70s and then in the 80s. And then when Urban Cowboy came out, I was doing Mickey Gilley, it just exploded, you know. It's like T.G. Shepherd once referred to that when I put Gilley out and the Urban Cowboy movement and so forth, that it changed the landscape of country music. And I was trying to, T.G.'s a good pal, we've had him on the show, but I was trying to see the landscape that it changed that he was referring to. I think he's referring to the personality and the way country music was being accepted more and more across the country in all fields. But it grew and grew, and finally the people in New York, the people in L.A. are saying, L.A. is not my favorite place to live. And the guy in New York saying, I think I want to go to the country. So they started easing in, the folks from New York, the folks from California, and they started trying to reshape country music. And they were very successful at doing that, by the way. They reshaped it to where I
They reshaped you out of a job, didn't they?
Yeah, I couldn't even recognize it anymore. But you know what? It'll tell you when to quit. Yeah. I was told this to you before many times, that when I was, the reason I departed Nashville is I was driving to work, heard a song, heard a record, that I was aware that it was a big record. What it was, I can't tell you, but it was big. And I said, if that song came into my office, I would turn it down. I would not record it on anyone, which tells me I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't need to be doing this. And I was.
And that was about what era?
Oh gosh, that was crowding in around 2000.
Late 90s?
Yeah, late 90s, 2000. It was started. And I called Bruce Henton, a friend of mine that was president of MCA Records, had worked for me for a number of years at Playboy as my West Coast promotion man, and we still remained really good friends. I said, Bruce, I'm going to Texas and rope. I was doing a lot of roping then, and my roping horse was really on his game. And I said, I'm just going to go rope. I wouldn't know how to record a record, what they want today. He said, nobody else does, but somebody in Washington, D.C. needs you. And I said, I beg your pardon. He said, someone needs you in Washington, D.C. I said, well, I know it's not G.W. Bush.
And he was in office at that time,
He was in
right?
office, yeah. So I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, it's not even on the air yet, but it's going to be huge, and they don't have anyone that knows anything about country music. He said, it's going to be called XM Satellite Radio. Well, I couldn't feature anything called XM, and the more he told me about it, the more interested I got. Oh, yeah, maybe that's so. So they brought me up to Washington, D.C. to look at XM Satellite facilities, which were still being built, but basically the graphics were there. You could tell this is going to be an incredible place with 82 digital studios under one roof, and they've got satellites flying in the sky, which eventually they did. At that time, the first satellite was not up yet. I went to work for them before the satellite was up, just to put together my channel, which was Channel 13, called Hank's Place, which was traditional country. Mm-hmm. So I worked on the architecture there for 3 months. Finally, we got the satellites up and ended up with 3 up, and it was wonderful. And, of course, we lived in Virginia because nobody lives in Washington, D.C., mostly. You know what?
Not with horses,
No, not with horses. But I did a little research on Washington, D.C. At nighttime, now this was in 2001, at nighttime there were 225,000 people in Washington. The next morning, 1.5 million came in. Mm-hmm. Nobody lived in D.C. They commuted from either Maryland, Virginia. In our case, it was Virginia, which was a lovely state, and we had a gorgeous place for horses and had a good place. The 50 to 60 mile commute one way was not fun every day, but it was a good ride. XM Satellite Radio was special.
Okay. And yes, it was. Now, let's go back to Music Row.
Oh gosh, how can I thought I just told you I left there in 2000.
You're chasing rabbits here and
or
running
give me
down
a
every
rabbit.
rabbit hole. So let's get back. All right, you've told me this story many times. So
let's hear it again.
Let's hear it again. You were a young man rodeoing, and you decided you were going to run through Nashville.
True story.
With a horse trailer.
With a horse trailer and two horses.
And it's summer, and it's hot.
Hot. Oh, it was hot. I was at a rodeo in Arkansas. I was a bulldogger, and I had a hazing horse because I also roped, and I'd rope off my hazing horse, and then I had a bulldogging horse, and I looked at an atlas, which I did see someone on television with an atlas. It was a storm chaser. And I told you, there's an atlas. I haven't seen one in years except when we have up front. But that's the way we navigated in those days. This was in somewhere around 60. And I looked at the atlas. I was at that rodeo in Arkansas. And I was trying to find out how far or get an idea it was to Nashville because I figured I would go up there and show them my songs. Mm-hmm. And it only looked like it was about an inch or two, which ended up being a couple of 100 miles uphill. So I'm dragging two horses going to Nashville, don't know a soul, but I know of a guy by the name of Chet Atkins that worked for RCA. I said, I'll go up there and show Mr. Chet Atkins my songs because people in Liberty down at the service station really liked them. We used to gather up at the service station every night when we weren't playing a club. And we'd all be singing and playing terrible, terrible music, but we thought it was good. And they had me pumped up. You're writing so good, you got to do something with your songwriting. And I didn't think too much of it. But when I was that close to Nashville, I just went up there and went to RCA, a little block building up there, and Chet Atkins' office was there. And I said, I'd like to see Mr. Atkins. She said, you don't have an appointment. I said, well, I just want to sing him 3 or 4 songs that I've written. She said, well, I'm sorry, he's all booked up today. I said, well, I've got 2 horses out there in the parking lot, and they are hot. That trailer is really hot, so I'll just have to check back with him. So I said, well, I'm going back home. And just as I'm driving out, I was talking about the old houses on 16th, Music Row, that had offices. There's this one building, old 2-story house, had Baron Young Enterprises. I said, Baron Young? My God, he was a superstar then. I mean, Baron was like big. I said, why can't I go in there? Well, being a cowboy, you just don't back off from a whole lot. So I went on in and I said, I'd like to see Mr. Young. I have some songs to show him. She said, well, just a minute, and she disappeared. And all of a sudden, in the doorway was Baron Young. And I said, oh, God, Baron Young. And I'm going to go in there and sing songs to one of the best country singers that ever lived. Okay, you're here, do it. So I went in, I sang 3 or 4 songs, and Baron was very gracious and very nice. And he said, boy, let me tell you, those ain't worth you know what. But you come back here, you need to move to Nashville, and every time you write a song, you bring it to me. And I said, well, that's encouraging, but I may do that. Let me give some thought to it. I don't even know if I told him that. I said, okay, I'll think about it. I probably told him, okay, I'm going to do it, knowing that was Baron. So I did go back to Texas. And I kept thinking about that meeting with Baron Young, and I said, you may ought to go. So I went more or less on a wing and a prayer and $30 and a half tank of fuel in my pickup. So got to Nashville and was very lucky to enjoy more success than I ever dreamed I would have. I thought I would, but I never really thought it was really going to happen, but it happened.
Yeah, it did. You had a good ride.
Yeah, 4 decades and so much fun with working with people that were dear friends. Mickey Gilley, wow. Mickey was special. Mickey was a pal of yours.
Yes.
And Cindy, his wife's a pal of yours. Mickey's gone and left us, but his music's here. I produced 14 number one singles on Mickey, and I can't remember whether it was 6 or 7 number one albums. I'll settle for 6, but I think it was.
It was a lot.
A lot.
Let's see. Up here on this wall. Oh, behind you, over your right shoulder, Smoking. That's the
Smoking.
one that you won all the awards
Yeah,
for.
that was Album of the Year, and that's at the Academy of Country Music in Hollywood. We knew we were nominated for just about everything, Mickey. And we went out there.
And you too. You got Producer of the Year that year.
Yeah, I know, but when it came to we got the single deal on Don't the Girls Get Prettier at Closing Time, another one, Bring It On Home to Me, we did that, and that was a number one record. We got an award for that. But when it came down to the album category, I'm saying, I know that the Outlaws album, which was huge, going platinum, it was in that category. Charlie Pride album was in there, a bunch of them, you know. I didn't think we were going to get Album of the Year. But when they called it out, I said, we really did it. And so we got the Album of the Year, and it won out amongst some big ones, you know. But that was quite a surprise. But Mickey and I were enjoying success.
Yeah.
And having a good time doing it.
Yes,
I'm telling you
were.
what, I've had a good time with you here, and I love you prompting me and shaking my memory bank.
Well,
because
I
once upon
wanted
a-
to talk just a little bit about Marty Robbins because you produced his last album, didn't you?
Yep. He recorded a song of mine on that album,
Yes.
which was
tell
also...
Tell me about that.
Oh, Lord have mercy. There were 2 things about Marty Robbins that will always be a treasure of a memory in my mind. One was re-recording on Marty the very first record he ever recorded. And I heard that song when I was 10 years old.
Which one?
I'll Go On Alone. Okay. Yeah. That was his first record on Capitol Records. And we were driving, my mother and I, on what we call the Anahuac Highway between Liberty and Anahuac, going down toward the Gulf Coast. And this song came on the radio, and I said, Mother, listen to that guy sing. And Mother, of course, as I mentioned, was a trained voice teacher, so I knew she would appreciate it. She said, boy, he sings really good. And the disc jockey came on and said, that's Marty Robbins, a boy with a tear in his voice, and I'll go on alone. Well, immediately I'm a Marty Robbins fan, and I listened to him on the Opry and didn't miss a chance to hear Marty Robbins. Get up to Nashville, and Marty and I become friendly, not running mates, but pretty good friends. And one day, Rick Blackburn from Columbia Records called and said, I'm with Marty, and we've decided that we would like to have you produce his next album.
And that was a thrill.
Yeah, it was a thrill. So we're getting stuff together, and I said, Marty, I want to show you a song. Now, Marty was one of the great songwriters also. Rarely did he ever record a song he didn't write, and the ones he wrote were huge. So I'm kind of intimidated, but I sang him the song, and he said, I really like that. I'll record it. I said, really? Well, thank you, sir. And we did, but the thrill came also. I said, Marty, have you ever thought about recording a song you recorded before? And he said, which one are you talking about? I said, your very first song, I'll Go On Alone. He said, I've always wanted to re-record it. I thought, thank God, thank you. And it really didn't hit home to me till we were actually recording it, and I thought, who would ever dream that a little ranch boy from down in South Texas would be recording the first song he ever heard on Marty Robbins? And I'm thinking,
Decades later.
And I'm thinking, it's all in God's plan.
Yep.
What can I tell you?
Well, I want to plug your song that you wrote that he put on that album. What is the name of the album?
The album was,
Everything-
Marty named it, Everything I Always
Everything I've
Wanted.
Always Wanted.
Yeah.
And the name of the song was Woman in My Bed.
Woman in My Bed, yeah. And I'd had that song for a while. I wish I'd have written it 20 years ago.
So all anybody has to do is
I wish I'd written
look
it.
at Marty Robbins on YouTube and Woman in My Bed, and boom, there you are.
Boom, there you are. I wish I'd have written it 20 years ago.
Why?
Well, then I'd had you in my bed.
Well, That was
But
a
I'm
long
treasuring
time ago.
Dear, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed being with you today, as I enjoy every day with you.
Well, wait a minute.
What is it? What is it? As Mel Tillis would say, what is it? What is it? What is it?
Have we finished Music Row?
No.
What happened to it?
I was getting into that earlier when I drifted off course.
Yes, you did.
I was talking about the people from the West Coast and the East Coast that moved there. And it turned into a whole different atmosphere. The vibe was no longer there of the one family where everyone was pulling for each other. We were not in it. Don't get me wrong. We all like to make money. We all like to make a living. But we were doing it in something we really, really enjoyed doing. I mean, it was few people get to do that. And it was a thing where pretty soon it became such hard, cold business and dollars, and you cannot treat records like you treat bolts and washers at the hardware store.
Yeah.
Music has its own personality, and all of a sudden the personality started changing. And when the personality changed, the music changed with it. And I'm not saying anything bad about the music. It just was not my kind of music. My kind of music was traditional country.
You could understand your time there. You could understand what they were saying.
Yeah, you could. And the songwriters, oh my God. I give all the credit to the songwriters in Nashville, because without a song, you don't have a record. And without a hit song, you don't have a star.
Speaking of that, over your right shoulder is one of the great songwriters, Dean Dillon, to which Brotherly Love with Gary Stewart, you produced that.
Yep, did that with Gary and Dean for RCA. RCA Records was very good to me. I did Louis Mandrell, Gary Stewart, Dean Dillon. I can't remember everybody, but I made a lot of records for RCA, and Joe Galante was there after Jerry Bradley left. And I was lucky enough to have a relationship with both those guys, because independent record producers, you have to have a relationship with the label heads or you don't work.
Yep. So what happened to Music Row as you knew it? Where did it go?
It went 180 degrees from where it was. It went from good old boys making good country music to let's rock and roll, let's look ragged on stage, let's get a lot of tattoos on our face.
Well, that's a personal preference, but anyway.
Well, I know it is.
You should dress whenever you're going on stage, but, we're just a couple of old folks, I guess.
I guess so. I'm used to people, like they would dress to put on a show, because people paid so much money to get in, whatever that price was, and they wanted to see a show. And so country music was about a show.
Yeah. Yes, it was. And people had fun. Well, it's been enjoyable today. And
it's been fun.
And at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see your email. Please email us.
Please do.
Please email us and let us know if there's something that you would like for Kilroy to talk about. Just please do so. Is Eddie Kilroy at, what is it? Eddie? What is your email?
Eddie Kilroy, Outlaws and Legends.
At outlawsandlegends.com. So we will put it on the screen.
Okay. We'll put it on the screen.
Also, we can do it.
Also, please subscribe.
Yep.
Yeah, because I want to make this something that people can enjoy listening to the stories that I have and that were accumulated over the decades.
Yep.
I got a mind bursting full of those stories. So tell your friends about it too. Email us like Liz said, but subscribe. You can get us on just about any social media there is. Meantime, this is Kilroy and Liz saying God bless each and every one of you. Good to be with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.